it for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Stanley pour les Canadiens, le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup!
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Bittt. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Good Friday evening, everyone. You know who I am by now. And if you don't, if you're new, my name is Matt Ohayon, filling in for Tony Marinaro on this Friday evening on the Sick Podcast. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, who have recently been named by Deloitte and CIBC as one of Canada's best managed companies, the country's leading business award, recognizing innovative and world-class companies. The best managed Canadian companies designation fuels Energy's purpose of creating progress for our customers, our employees, our communities. And join a winning team and check out Energy's career page for available opportunities. Also brought to you by Playground. Don't miss Playground's August Million Poker Series from August 23rd to September 4th, with $1 million in guaranteed prize pools, 7 championship ring events, and a $600,000 guaranteed main event. Located just over the Mercier Bridge, only minutes away from downtown Montreal. Playground. Also brought to you by, of course, La Bittt Tibi beer, brewed in Quebec and a winner of a dozen international awards. La Bittt Tibi offers quality microbrewery beers made with premium ingredients for everyone's taste. La Bittt Tibi, embrace your true nature. And lastly, by Murphy Clinic, who are an aesthetic clinic specializing in medical aesthetic care. They offer permanent laser hair removal as well as a wide range of treatments for skin problems such as acne, rosacea, fine lines, and more. They currently have 2 clinics, one located in Montreal's Shop Angus, and the second one on the North Shore in Terrebonne. They're also opening very soon in Quebec City. Visit murphyclinic.ca or on Instagram at Murphy Clinic. All right. So not even a lot of news happened at the beginning of the week, but we're going to touch on it. Kind of a quiet lull week for the Canadiens, but a big week for hockey in general. Some big headlines coming out this week. And we're going to break it all down with our regular Friday guest, Mr. Stu Cowan. Stu, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you? I like the Bengals orange.
Yeah, it wasn't even, it's not even intentional, but I'm getting excited. It's the last week of preseason, which means just after Labor Day weekend, the NFL season kicks off. So very, very excited for that. I don't know. I know you're not the biggest football guy, but you'll catch a couple games now.
Oh yeah, I enjoy watching the NFL. My son's really into the NFL, so he's 22, so I like watching the games with him.
It's one of the best things that I would recommend if you can, depending on the team he's a fan of, or if he's just a football fan in general, you got to make it to a game. I know it's busy for you. I know it's busy for you in the season. It's crossing over with hockey season, but if you got the time, you got to do it. It's just the tailgating. It's really, it's a 10 a.m. till 4:30 p.m. event if it's a 1 o'clock game.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to take in an NFL game yet. Something I definitely love to. I actually got a chance to watch my first NBA game. I guess it was a couple of years ago. I was in New York covering the Canadiens, and I went to see a Knicks game at Madison Square Garden. That was really cool. But yeah, the NFL game live, I'd love to go see it. But well, Buffalo seems like the sort of cool spot to go, and close for us to go anyway.
Well, close-ish, right? I mean, like it's still about 7 or 8 hours, something like that. I have friends who do it all in one day, like drive the morning of, go to the game, and drive home after. I'm like, you guys are insane. Yeah. Anyways, let's jump in to the hockey stuff that's been going on this week. Some discussion points. Kirby Dach made an appearance on a podcast. Let's start there. He said he really enjoyed playing with Suzuki and Caulfield, obviously, who wouldn't? But to me, this is super interesting because, when at the beginning of the season, it's like, is he a center? Is he a winger? We don't know. And then he got moved around a couple times and excelled at center. So let's start there. I mean, where do you see him fitting in now and, maybe 3 years, 2 years down the road?
Well, I know the Canadians see him as a center moving forward. They've been pretty clear about that. But, I mean, he certainly looked really good. He was the best guy to play with those other two guys last season. He seemed to fit in with them really well, sees the game well, can control the puck through the neutral zone, get it in the zone, great at winning puck battles, good vision, good hockey IQ. So I wouldn't be shocked if they start the season with him playing with those two guys. Just they can't find somebody else. I mean, they've tried Josh Anderson there, and Josh Anderson is more of an up and down, go hard to the net type of guy. And Marty St. Louis trying to teach him to be more than that. And we saw signs of that coming last season. But to me, at this point, Kirby Dach looks like a really good fit there. They have a lot of centers on the team. It's amazing to think when, Mark Bergevin used to talk about how hard it was to find centers, and now the Canadians have an abundance of them. So I wouldn't be shocked. I don't think it would be a bad idea to put them on the wing with Suzuki and Caulfield if nobody else steps up and shows that they're better than him to fill that position during training camp. Yeah,
I hard to disagree there. I mean, he looked really, really good once he started to come on, and really it seemed like finally they had found him, but he was brought in as a center, and like you said, the Canadians see him as a center. What's interesting is the case of two players, because we talk about one of them as if they're an old man when they're not, in Sean Monahan, who's a natural center. And the other one is the new guy coming in, and it's Alex Newhook. Like everyone seems to pigeonhole Newhook into, the third center slot, which I guess in an ideal world, if you build a great roster, sure. But I feel like if he could take on those second line center responsibilities, I'm talking Newhook now, that could be your solution at second center. And then Dach kind of in the mold of like how Team Canada plays. Obviously it's a little bit different because they have an abundance of talent on Team Canada, but they got centers littered all over the lineup playing wing. So I feel like that's a situation that the Canadians might be considering now.
Well, it's a lot easier for a center to learn to play wing than vice versa. We saw that with Jonathan Drouin, when the Canadians tried to make him a center, and it's just a big difference playing center. But if you can play center, you can play wing. If you can play wing, you can't necessarily play center. So the Canadians are lucky. They have a lot of guys. Monahan can play center. He can play wing. Newhook, like you mentioned, he can do both. Dach can do both. So they're in a position where they can move guys around. And, I think back the day, a couple of days before the draft in Montreal, when the Canadians drafted Slafkovsky #1, and they had all the top prospects in all of Montreal. And I asked Slafkovsky, why should the Canadians take you at #1? And part of his answer was because I can play with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. And I'd love to play with them. And that, like down the road, that could be who is playing with them. But Slafkovsky, at least last season, showed he's nowhere near close to being a #1 line forward in the NHL at this point. The game just moves too quick for him. But for him, the best hockey Slafkovsky played last year was when he was with Monahan, who was able to sort of slow the game down a bit with him. So, having Monahan play with Slafkovsky again, to me, makes a lot of sense this season. And have him come along. Maybe he is the future winger to play with Caulfield and Suzuki, and if and when that day comes, then you move Dach back to center and move him around. So it's interesting that Marty St. Louis has a lot of different lines. It's one of the most interesting things to see during training camp this year, leading into the season, what the lines are going to look like, what the forward guys are going to look like. Because there's a lot of guys who can move up and down, guys who can play center, guys who can play wing. But like heading into camp, to me, the most logical guy to play with Suzuki and Caulfield, judging from what we saw last year, would be Kirby Dach.
Yeah, again, hard to disagree. I mean, I guess one player in particular would have something to say about that, and that would be Raphael Harvey-Pinard. But I mean, this is one where it's like, I said this, when I talk about football, I say the same thing about the Bears quarterback, Justin Fields, in what I'm about to say about Raphael Harvey-Pinard. He did it when he did what he did, he played really well, and you can't take that away from him because he was really great at coming on at the end of the season. But it's one thing to do that when the games for your own team really don't matter because you're practically playing with an AHL lineup and you're eliminated from the playoffs. It's another thing to do that when, it's a fresh season and let's see what we could do. Like, I think that personally speaking, that Martin St. Louis and Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon would be thrilled if Raphael Harvey-Pinard forced his way onto the top line. That's a great problem to have. But he's a name in there that I've seen been floating around, and I have my doubts, and I don't know. You can't knock his compete. The compete will always be there, but he was shooting the puck at 35% or something like that.
I mean, when in Laval, I called him Lavaliger, right? Because there's so many comparisons to Brendan Gallagher's style of play. And he is a younger version of Gallagher. And remember back with Gallagher, he was a guy that whatever line wasn't working, the coach would put Gallagher on that line, and that line would get a spark. And I think Harvey-Pinard is a similar type of player. I think you can play him. You can play him on the first line. He's not a natural first line player, but you can play him first line, second line, third line, fourth line, like what Gallagher was back then. Whatever line you put him on, he's going to provide them a spark. He's not like Gallagher. He's not afraid to go to the dirty areas. He can score from further out than Gallagher. So it's a possibility. But again, you're talking about first line. If you have Dach, Suzuki, and Caulfield, that's 3 first-round draft picks playing together on a first line. They're all young. They're all can grow together. I understand some people say, well, Dach's a center. He should be playing center. Again, moving forward, he's young. That might be the point. But, if you want to stack your first line with 3 top guys, there's 3 top guys right there that I think would work pretty well together. We saw they already did work well together. And, from the podcast that Dach did, it sounds like he certainly wouldn't mind playing with Suzuki and Caulfield again to start the season. So, to me, if today you're saying what would be my number 1 line for the Canes starting the season, that would be it. But training camp can change a lot of things. And the Canadiens showed last year, their coaching staff and management team showed last year that they let guys win spots. Nobody thought Arber Xhekaj would make the team last season, and he did. And Justin Barron, former first-round pick, the guy they got from Colorado for Arturi Lehkonen, they sent them to the minors because they thought Xhekaj played better and he was more ready. So that, to me, that's really one of the most important things that this new management team, Kent Hughes and Gordon and St. Louis has taken over, has shown is that they don't really care where you were drafted or who you were. If you show that you can play and you're ready to play, you're going to play and you're going to get a chance. So that's, as I said, that's one of the reasons I'm so looking forward to training camp and the preseason games to see there's jobs that are open and spots that are open in the lineup, and guys are going to be able to compete for it, knowing in the back of their head, with Arber Xhekaj as an example, that yeah, there is a chance. It's not like there's no, like, Harvey-Pinard's not coming to training camp saying there's no chance in hell that I'm going to be playing the first line. It's a possibility he might, so he's going to go in. So there'll be a real good competition for positions, I think, during training camp in the preseason.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I'm really excited to see, is just because obviously they didn't bring in many guys in the offseason. Nobody was expecting them to. But I'm excited to see that internal competition, because it just goes back to the thing that we always talk about, which is that they're trying to build a culture. And, what kind of culture is it setting if it's just like, okay, we invested all these resources into these prospects, and then, we're just going to toss you to the side for a player we signed in free agency. You got to let the guys that you draft, be the guys that you drafted. So I really like that they have this internal competition thing going, and I'm just I'm really, really excited for it, because I think that's something that we hadn't had in a long time in Montreal. I feel like for the longest time, it's like we basically know who's playing where and who's making the team, and just, the preseason games were kind of just a warm-up.
Yeah, and like Xhekaj gives hope to another guy like him who wasn't drafted and maybe doesn't have a lot of high hopes coming into camp, that, yeah, maybe I can make it. And, as I said, Barron was the guy who was sent down. It also sends a message to first-round draft pick. They're not going to hand anything to you. Like, it's not just because we drafted you in the first round or whoever we gave up to get you doesn't guarantee you a spot on this team. And, you mentioned about Canadiens development over the years. One of the problems was, they'd call up an offensive-type player from Laval or, St. John's back in the day, and they'd play him 5 minutes a game on the fourth line with 2 pluggers, and he wouldn't do much, and then they'd send him back down. And then last year, injuries obviously played a role in it also. I don't know if Harvey would have ended up playing on the first line if there weren't so many injuries. I don't know if he even would have got called up. But he got an opportunity, and he made the most of it. And he showed, at least to me, that he can play in the NHL. Whether he can be a first liner, I'm not sure. But can he be a top 6? Maybe. Can he be a third line guy? Definitely. The compete levels there, so he's shown he can put the puck in the net when he gets a chance. And it's just that it's been a real breath of fresh air just as far as the way they look at developing young players now moving forward and giving guys an opportunity to succeed. If you show me you're ready to do it, you can do it. You're going to get every opportunity to do it.
So just, back to the Caulfield Suzuki, we'll call it player X on the other side. Should that be a priority for the Canadians? Like, does that need to be hammered in this year where it's like, okay, we need to solidify this top line before we start, making signings, pushing forward? Or is it a matter of like, okay, we're going to see if someone can do it on a consistent basis. And if it doesn't, hey, I mean, the name William Nylander just keeps propping up. So I'll throw him. So it's like William Nylander is available. So worst comes to worst, we'll sign him. And then we have our top line guy.
What a line that would be. That would certainly get Canadians fans excited. I don't think it's a main priority. I mean, lines change all the time, right? I mean, you see guys go through slumps. Lines aren't competing. They change around. You go back to the days of Scotty Bowman. He believed in duos. He would have two guys who would play together a lot, and then they'd have a third guy that might rotate in and out. So that might be a similar situation with the number one line until they find somebody they want to stay there for extended period. Do they want Dach to stay there for an extended period? How much are they, do they want him to get minutes playing center if they really think that's his position moving forward? But I don't think it's that much of a big deal. I mean, the way systems work now with the F1, F2, F3, one on the forecheck, and that guys are sort of, it's not like it used to be when the center just went up and down the middle and the wingers went up and down the wing. Guys are sort of more interchangeable with the way today's systems work. So, your centerman's taking the faceoffs, but after that, a lot of it changes as far as who's the first guy in on the forecheck, et cetera, and the systems they're playing. So it's not as, being center is not the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. And as the Canes are lucky when you got a lot of guys who can play center, as I mentioned earlier, center and wing. It makes it a lot easier when guys are sort of rotating on a forecheck or back check and whatnot. The guys understand the roles of a center, understand the roles of a winger. And again, as I mentioned before, Jonathan Drouin, I mean, trying to take a guy who skills and abilities are mainly as a winger and try and put him at center with all the defensive responsibilities and face-offs that comes in. In hindsight, that was a big mistake by the Canadians putting Drouin in that position. It certainly didn't help him as far as the time that he did spend in Montreal.
Mm-hmm. So let's take a look now, because you mentioned it a little earlier. We keep mentioning there's a lot of young guys on this team, and you mentioned, the first line, it's 3 first-round picks. Well, The Athletic came out with an article. Corey Pronman, their head scout, or whatever his title is, he knows a lot about prospects. Came out that the Canadians ranked 6th in pipeline rankings. Now, Cole Caulfield and Kirby Dach are part of these pipeline rankings. So that'll give them a boost, certainly. But interesting to note, 2 guys above Kirby Dach, because Kirby Dach came in at number 4 on the Canadians' internal list, which were Juraj Slafkovsky and the most polarizing figure to ever step foot in Montreal since PK Subban, before he's even sniffed a Canadian sweater on the ice, is David Reinbacher. I mean, that's a pretty ringing endorsement, at least the way I read it. 2 pretty ringing endorsements for Reinbacher and Slafkovsky, that they're ahead of Kirby Dach, who, like we've said, he's only he's turning 22, so he's still got some time to develop. Players don't figure it out right away. So I feel like that's a pretty ringing endorsement of those 2 young guys, and I think that Canadians fans could start to get a little excited about Juraj Slafkovsky.
Yeah, well, the 2 guys you mentioned, Slafkovsky and Reinbacher, they still got that sort of new car smell, right? They're still the new kids. I mean, Slafkovsky last season didn't look, Kirby Dach much more ready to play in the NHL, and much better in the NHL than Slafkovsky is at this point. But these guys are, number 1 overall pick and number 5 overall pick. Kirby Dach was number 3 overall pick. So it's sort of looking at potential. I think they're looking at there more so than where they are at this point. I'm really interested. Slafkovsky, one of the guys I'm really interested to see what he can do this year, because just reading this different offseason training he's done, he's lost weight, which I think will be a good thing. It's hard to play in the NHL at 230 pounds. He wasn't fat. He was just a big built like an NFL tight end more than a hockey player. I think that'll help him losing a little bit of weight, making him be a little bit quicker. With Reinbacher, I mean, I don't think we're going to see him in the NHL this season. Slafkovsky, last season, I've mentioned before, and I've been on with you, that I think they made a mistake by not sending him to the World Junior Championships and giving him that experience and maybe giving him a bit of a confidence boost. Obviously, the injury came in and that ended his season. But, those rankings, as I said, it's like the new car smell. We haven't seen as much as we haven't seen anything what Reinbacher can do in the NHL. We've seen sort of what Slafkovsky can do. But to me, I mean, Kirby Dach's ahead of those guys, personally, at this point, as far as what they can do in the NHL this season.
No, I agree with you there, but the point is like, because we're going to get to expectations. We've been talking a lot about him, and I just want to know, because I've been asking a lot of my guests this, like, what are the expectations, or what are fair expectation levels for Juraj Slafkovsky? Because, again, like you said, first overall pick, highly touted coming into the NHL. He won the MVP at the Olympics a couple of years ago. This is, he's been playing with men forever. To me, it's like, then you have the other side where, okay, he didn't have a good rookie season. So people are kind of like really tanking expectations. I don't know. This guy's still a first overall pick. I don't think he's going to be a flop. I mean, nobody thought Nail Yakupov would be a flop either, but that's another conversation. What's a fair level of expectation for Juraj Slafkovsky this year?
Well, it's tough for any 18-year-old to play in the NHL. Even Lafreniere was supposed to be one of the undisputed number one pick, was going to be a star in the NHL. It hasn't worked out that way with him. He just signed a new contract. It's like just over $2 million a year for a couple of years. He's been a disappointment so far with the Rangers, but again, he's like 21 now. So for Slafkovsky, they're similar. They're two big bodies, two big guys. Lafreniere was a man when he was a boy, right, playing in junior, and that made things easier for him. And same with Slafkovsky. He was a man, as you said, he did play against men before, but it wasn't NHL men, and it was on a bigger rink where the game's a little slower and you have more time to think and more time to move, and you don't need to keep your head up as much. We saw Slafkovsky get caught a number of times last season with his head down. He's lucky he wasn't more seriously hurt. The fact that he was 230 pounds helped. He had 4 goals last year in half a season. So to me, what would be a good season for him? I would say 12 to 15 goals, if he could get that as a 19-year-old. He played the most games of any of the guys drafted in the first round last year in the NHL. He wasn't ready to play in the NHL last year, but the Canadians were just trying to keep him there, and I think they wanted to have him around Adam Nicholas. They wanted to have him around Marty St. Louis. He was also the number one pick, so there's that. He was number one pick coming in and playing immediately in the NHL. But he has, does he have something to prove? Yeah, he has something to prove this season because he's the number one pick. But if he had been like the number 8 pick or the number 9 pick, the expectations wouldn't be as high. So I'm sort of comparing him to Ian Lafreniere at this point. Is Lafreniere a bust? No, he's been a disappointment to the Ranger fans for a number one pick, but he's still young. And I think for a lot of guys, Eric Lindros was sort of different. Eric Lindros was a man when he was a boy, and it made it easier for him as a kid playing, but he was also able to play like a man in the NHL. He still had that habit of keeping his head down, which ended up costing him when Scott Stevens laid him out. But so for Slafkovsky, I think you just need to be realistic expectations. Like I said, if he had 12 goals this season and showed improvement, if you just look more, I think the main thing for him is just needs to look more comfortable on the ice in the NHL. He needs to look just more comfortable with the flow of the game. And that's why, again, that's why I think Monahan can help him if they have him as a line mate. Because Slafkovsky's top last season, Monahan was able to slow the game down for him a little bit and control the pace. And I think that's really important for him for his progression, is just to get more comfortable with the pace of the NHL. And the fact he watched so many games in the press box last year might help him with that. He might realize that he has more time in certain situations than he thought, and that he has less time in certain situations than he thought. It was a real problem for him with the puck coming around the boards in the defensive zone and getting it out with the defenseman chipping in on him, or pinching in on him. So those are the things I'm more looking forward to seeing with him this year, just how he adjusts to the speed of the NHL game.
You know what I'm excited for? Because I think he'll get more opportunity than he got last season on the power play. Because I forget who it was against or what the game was, but I have this vivid memory of him just kind of on the opposite side of Nick Suzuki, where he pulls out that rocket of a shot out of nowhere. He scored a goal like that in last year, and I was like, there's something there, because when you have a shot, you could play. You that's a tool you could play. You don't exactly have to be the best skater. There's ways to figure it out.
Like Bossy, Hoffman, there's a lot of guys like that. Yeah.
Well, that's it. So like I saw him unleash that shot. It may not even have gone in, and I'm remembering it incorrectly, and it rang off the post. But I remember something like that happening, and I'm like, man, once this guy's comfortable on NHL ice, he's going to be able to unleash that shot a lot more, because it's like there's certain situations where you have more time than you think. Mm-hmm. And the power play is definitely one of those. So I feel like once he gets more comfortable and more at ease with playing in the NHL, that's a tool to his game that's going to, at the very least, if he doesn't work out as, this 70-point player, 80-point player, first overall billing, he's at least going to have that in his back pocket to make it work for him.
Well, he has a quick release. There's no doubt about that. He can but he needs to shoot the puck more, and that's just a case, as I mentioned before, just being more comfortable with the pace of the NHL and the smaller rink. And you look what this kid went through last year. I mean, all the hype over being the number one pick. Remember at the Bell Center too. It wasn't like he was the number one pick by the Canadiens in Dallas or somewhere. I mean, the arena erupted. Adjusting to a new city, a new country, a new language, new teammates, everything. It was a huge adjustment. That's part of the reason why 18-year-olds, it's hard for them to succeed in the NHL or be dominant in the NHL as a rookie, or even in their second year. So again, just hope that this year everything's a little bit more comfortable. He's going to be more comfortable with the city. He's going to be more comfortable with where he lives, more comfortable with his teammates, more comfortable with the travel, more comfortable with playing on the smaller rink, all that stuff. So it's a gradual progression, which is why I say, I'm not expecting him to come in and score 25 goals next season. It's the gradual progression. Progression, 10 to 15 goals next season to me would be a realistic progression scale for him going into a second year. And it's 19 years old. He's still a teenager. He's still a kid in a man's body.
Yeah. Next, there was another player on this list, not really ranked very high, but that's because he wasn't eligible to play in the NHL at the point that this was written. And then the next day, he is eligible, reportedly. Don't know if it was confirmed or not exactly, but reports were saying that he will be able to enter NHL ranks. Is Logan Mailloux. Obviously, we know what happened in his past, but I think personally speaking, everyone deserves a second chance, depending on the degree of what you did, and not to diminish what he did, but, very, very young when it happened. He apologized, took ownership, and the Canadiens, I feel like, this is one thing where it's like Marc Bergevin put a lot of resources in him. They put a first round pick. Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, they wouldn't be punished from Molson if it didn't work out for him, and he didn't, and then they had to cut ways with him because it's not their asset. They didn't bring him to the team. Mm-hmm. So this is a guy who I'm excited to see in camp. Seeing countless, highlights of OHL, OHL highlights of him ripping the puck from the blue line and laying people out. Very excited to see him playing for him to get a second chance in the NHL.
Well, he stood out at the development camp. I mean, he was one of the best players on the ice. For a guy that big, he moves really well. He has that shot, like you mentioned. He was playing 30 minutes a game in the OHL playoffs last season. All the talent's there. He's got everything size. He can move. He can shoot. He can do all that stuff, as you mentioned. The reports that the NHL is going to allow him to play, but until nothing official. I don't see anything official being announced until the Canadiens decide they want to put him on an NHL roster. Because until then, he's not going to be on an NHL roster. The NHL doesn't have to approve him to be on an NHL roster. But from the reports that came out, I know he met with Gary Bettman in July. I imagine the Canadiens were told we have a pretty good idea of whether he was going to be allowed or not going to be allowed to play. Just that would factor into their decisions going into training camp. And then after training camp, if they were to put him on the NHL roster, I imagine that would be when it would be the official announcement. Maybe it'll come earlier since some of the reports have come out. But I expect him to be playing Laval this season. I don't expect him to be playing for the Canadians. I think it'd be the best thing for his development moving forward. And he made what he did when he was 17 years old. He has been punished. He was found guilty in a court in Sweden. He was fined. He was suspended by the OHL. This is something that's going to follow him the rest of his career. It's going to be, it's not going to be totally forgotten. But he was 17 and he deserves a second chance. And I believe that at this point, he's done everything. He's followed all the programs the Canadians have asked him to do. He's done everything they've asked him to do. At this point, I think he should be allowed to play in the NHL. Though I wondered if the NHL might put in some kind of a suspension as much to punish the Canadians as to punish Mailloux, because I know Gary Bettman was very upset when the Canadians did draft Mailloux after he had asked not to be drafted by anybody, and especially in the first round. It didn't look good on the Canadians. It didn't look good on the NHL, and Bettman wasn't happy about it. So I wondered if maybe that in the back of Gary Bettman's mind might result in Mailloux being suspended for a period if the Canadians do indeed put him on an NHL roster. But it's sort of, until they do, it's almost a moot point. But I expect that the NHL will give him the okay to play in the NHL. And as I said, it's a second chance. It was 3 years ago now, I guess it was. Since then, he did the punishment that the courts handed down to him. He's been apologetic. He's said that in the future he hopes to help other young people to learn from his mistake. Kids today don't realize the stuff they put on their phones and what they do with their phones is out there forever, and the damage it can do to themselves and to other people. So it might be a learning experience for others moving forward. You hope it is. And for Logan Mailloux moving forward, I hope he's learned his lesson and that there's going to be nothing else like this in his future. But as a hockey player, as I said, at the development camp, he looked really, really good. I mean, I was really impressed by how well he moves and how fluid he is on his skates, and again with that big shot. So I don't think he's going to be playing in the NHL this season, but a year in Laval I think would be a good thing for him at this point. And he hasn't played a lot of hockey. You got to remember with COVID and suspension and whatnot, he hasn't played a lot of hockey over the last couple of years. So I'm sure the Canadians would like to get him, put him in Laval and have him play a ton of minutes down there.
You know what I like about hearing that he was a dominant force at the development camp is that you're kind of on equal footing there. Where, you're playing in the OHL as a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old, you're like really, you're in the oldest age category there, so you're still playing against 17 and 16-year-olds, and even in some cases 15-year-olds. So when you're at the development camp and you're able to stand out, you're on an equal footing because everyone's 18, 19, 20 there. So that's one thing that I think that a lot of Canadians fans can get excited about, because I know that Snake Beauvoir, one of Tony's regular guests, he's not Mailloux's biggest fan. I remember hearing him saying, yeah, he's playing well, but he's playing against kids. This guy is older. He's way older than these guys. So that's one thing that comes to mind when thinking about Mailloux, and agree with you. He's going to spend the season in Laval, and maybe hopefully not because of injury, but hopefully he gets a couple looks in the NHL, just because, I'd like to see in another season where it quote unquote doesn't matter the results so much. I mean, you'd like to do better than you did last year, but in a season where the results on the ice don't really matter so much at the end of a game, just say, hey, you played well. You look really good. Let's see how far along you are. And just, Laval's 20 from Bell Center to Place Bell is 25 minutes, an hour if there's traffic. So, that's not really disrupting all that much of his play in Laval versus if he was in St. John's.
Yeah. And as I said, I just think Laval's the place. And, going back to development camp, it's sort of, it was 2 days of drills and 1 4-on-4 scrimmage. So just, you can't focus too much on that. I know people were breaking down the scrimmage and the 4-on-4 scrimmage is what it was. But just in the drills, I mean, he stood out just by how well he moved, how well he shot the puck, and it was physical too, the drills, and he was very, very physical, and but again, the jump to playing anywhere below the NHL and going to the NHL, it's huge. And Jaden Struble at the development camp, he was their second round pick the year they took Caulfield, 2019, and he's a big kid, 6'4", 215 pounds, built like an NFL football player almost. And at development camp, he was talking about, he went from university and he played a few games in Laval last year. And he said he was surprised. And this is at the AHL, not the NHL. He says, NCAA hockey had shove guys and they'd fall into the boards as they go down. In the AHL, they don't. It's the AHL, not the NHL. Just the strength that players have at the AHL level and the NHL level, whatever size they are, the strength. So that's going to be another thing for me. As you said, he was a big guy playing against younger kids in the OHL. But, I mean, everybody playing junior at that age, if you're big, that's the case. It's whether they can carry it over to the NHL, as I mentioned with Lafreniere, a similar thing, a big guy playing junior, and it's been more difficult for him. But again, in today's NHL, for a defenseman and the mobility they have to have, and he has that along with the size and the shot. So that's it's hard to play defense in the NHL today if you're not mobile. If you're not mobile, you got to really be able to think fast. Like David Savard, one of the reasons David Savard was able to play so well, and Marty St. Louis talked about that. His feet might not be that quick, but his brain's quick. He can think and be in the right positions. But for Logan Mailloux, he's going to be one of the guys that's going to be really interesting to watch during training camp. And as I said, I'm pretty sure he'll end up playing in Laval this year, and he'll play a lot. And as he said, it's not far for him to get from Laval to Montreal. It's also not far from fans to go to Laval if they want to watch him play. And Laval's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year.
Big time.
They're going to have a lot of players that are going to be the future of the Canadians playing down there. And it's been a while since the Canadians have had that depth on their farm team. As Rob Ryman said at development camp, when he first joined the Canadians in his role as a player development, he said the cupboards were pretty bare. The cupboards are getting full now since Ken Hughes took over, and they'll continue to get more full. And fans will be lucky. Now you just need to go to Laval to watch them. It's not like when they're in St. John's and you'd have to, jump a plane and go over there to watch them, which I did a few years ago. But Laval's gonna be a lot of fun. I think the Canadians are gonna be fun to watch this season, and I think Laval's also gonna be fun to watch. So Montreal hockey fans are gonna be in for a treat.
It's coming up fast. Labor Day is already next Monday, and then
the golf tournament September. Canes golf tournament September 11th. It's all coming up quick.
And by then you'll be able to tell by my mood if the Bengals had won the prior day or the previous week. It's happening fast. It's exciting. End of summer always has there's always silver lining to the end of summer.
It's a great time of year when you get to September, October, and you have baseball playoffs and NFL starting and NHL starting. It's a great time of the year.
There you go. Stu, thank you very much, and enjoy your weekend.
Okay, you too.
That was Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette. I am Matt Ohayon of the Sick Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll catch you next time.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. Bittt. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.